How do you and your firm set yourself apart in a marketplace dominated by disruption, uncertainty, and rapid changes? This is the Issues Watch podcast. Hi, I'm Don Meyer, Chief Marketing Officer at the New Jersey Society of CPAs, and welcome to the Issues Watch podcast. How do some firms thrive through even the most turbulent of times? Are they just lucky, or do they know something that you don't? These days, it's more important than ever for a professional services firm to differentiate itself and build a resilient competitive advantage. But where to begin? With me here today to help you figure it out is Dr. Lee Frederiksen, Managing Partner at Hinge. Welcome, Dr. Frederiksen.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here.
Great, thank you. We really appreciate you joining us. Well, for background, why don't we get started by having you provide some background on Hinge and how you help professional services firms?
Sure. Well, Hinge is a branding and marketing firm that works exclusively with professional services firms. And accounting and financial services firms are one of our primary ones we work with. I'm an old EY alumni from going way back, and a behavioral psychologist by training. And I was a client of Hinge. And, after I sold the business, I had a consulting firm. I got involved with Hinge and really wanted to develop something that focused on using what works and really focus on research-based. In other words, finding out what works for professional services firms and for their clients, and focus on those kinds of services and those kinds of programs. So that's what we do. We help them with branding, marketing, developing your marketing plans, executing your marketing plans, designing your websites, all the tools you need to do it right.
All right, great. And this is something that probably would have been unheard of in the accounting profession 25 or 30 years ago, but when it comes to
illegal.
You're right, exactly. But these days, everybody wants to try and gauge where buyer behavior is going. So what's your research telling you about changes in buyer behavior?
Well, it's very interesting, Don. There's been a long-term change that's been happening over time, partly with the generational change and with us getting comfortable with working with people remotely and doing things. So there's been a long-term trend towards more digital interaction. And that's been going on for many years, really, the last 10 or 15 years. And then when COVID hit, it had an immediate acceleration effect. Some firms went from 0 to 100 miles an hour, all, over the space of just a few days, scrambling. And what's happened is two things. One is the clients have gotten used to working remotely, and that's allowed them to say, well, I'll work at the firm that can solve my problem, no matter where they're located. I don't care which city they're in or which location. So the client's behavior has changed. And then on the other hand, you have within the firms, the employees say, well, this commuting stuff, it's a lot easier for me to work from home. I'd rather do that. So you have a significant portion of people who are saying, look, I'm changing my lifestyle. I want to work from home most of the time, all of the time, those kinds of things. So together, they've really, really changed the underlying dynamics of competition and kind of what it takes to be successful as a growing CPA firm.
Do you find that professional services firms, accounting firms are adapting to this new normal? Are they adapting to work from home and remote work and all of that and all the other changes that need to happen?
Yeah, it's really it's interesting. Most of them are. I would say there's about a third of them that are really embracing it and are really going all in. And what we can see is they are growing faster and they are more profitable, those that are embracing it. Then you've got some who really haven't started yet, who are thinking, oh, I'm close to retirement. I'm just going to get out of here. My clients like face-to-face better anyway. They impose their own values on their clients and they're resisting. So I think we're going to find there's going to be winners and losers that come out of this in terms of how well they adapt to the new reality and to the new kinds of things that clients want and clients value.
So a lot of accounting firms, especially during the pandemic, ironically enough, a lot of firms are doing quite well.
Yeah.
Barry Melanson from the AICPA has said that there are firms that are making more money than they've ever dreamed of. So do you find it challenging to convince firms, especially firms with more experienced leaders, do you find it difficult to convince those firms to change their behavior considering how well they're doing right now?
I would say yes and no. I mean, with some, yes, it's they just don't. But I think firms with experienced leadership, they recognize that the sun is shining today and it's harvest season, but it's not going to always be that way. There is going to be a change. So we're seeing a lot of firms really focus on two things. One is, how do I improve the digital experience? And this is before they work with it. How do I help clients understand how we can help them? How do I make our interactions with clients better? Those kinds of things. So we see a chunk of firms really embracing that and prioritizing that. That's like their number one priority. Then there's another wave of firms that are still struggling with how do I do this remote work thing? Can we keep our people and so on and so forth? And they're just kind of hanging on with their fingernails, trying to figure it out and hoping they can figure it out before the recession comes or before something else changes that upsets their whole marketplace.
Do you find that the firms that are sticking or prefer the face-to-face model, do they believe it's essential to their business, or is it more just is it sort of personal preference? The firms that are reluctant to switch over to remote work, what do you find is their reasoning behind that?
Generally, their reasoning is around the nature of the work they do. For example, if people are involved in a lot of transaction work and so forth, there is value to being together in the same room working on something simultaneously. And some people have a belief that helps with some of the creativity and so forth for some of the solutions. So I think those are really legitimate kind of concerns that one needs to take into account. Then there is another, I think they're in the minority, but it's kind of what I would call the sunk cost people. Gee, we got this whole office, we're paying for it anyway. Why don't we have the people in here and get the benefit of that? That kind of argument. Or, gee, I had to come into the office every day for 30 years. Now, doggone it, you're going to have to come into the office every day. So I think those we will look back at those days, and those are the ones who said, well, who needs a fax machine? It's time moves on, clients move on, technology moves on, and eventually those arguments kind of fade into the past.
Right. And I guess the accounting profession has never really been known as early adopters. So I guess it would make sense if they were a little bit slower than maybe some other professions or some other industries and truly embracing the idea of remote work there, because the accounting profession, when it comes to technology and some other things, tends to be a little bit of a laggard. I think just because of the cautious nature of the profession.
Well, indeed. And, who wants to hire bleeding edge accounting service?
Right. Right.
This is something that, their traditional attestation and tax work and so forth, that is of a different nature. But of course, the underlying technology the company's using is evolving every day. So, there's a demand that you need to keep up with that, particularly if you have any kind of sophisticated clients.
Right, exactly. Now, obviously, there's a lot going on in the accounting profession right now. I guess we're not officially out of the pandemic, but we're sort of, the worst is behind us, hopefully. But now, of course, we have concerns. It seems like we've had concerns for almost a year about a slowing economy. We keep hearing recession. Are we in one? Are we about to be in one? Are firms preparing for a slowdown?
Great question. You have, I think, almost across the board, what you have is a recognition that we're sort of in what I refer to as the age of uncertainty. You know, we've seen now the impact of pandemics, wars, possible recessions, all of these things sort of compounding, and how that can, disturb markets and roil markets. So I think even those that are doing well have one eye out for what else is going to happen. And what we're seeing a lot of is people are doing two things right now. One is they're focusing a lot more on recruiting and retention. We're doing a lot of work with the employer brand. How do you portray your firm? How do you establish your brand to be able to attract and retain people is one part of it. So I think a lot of firms are focused there. And then others are kind of doing that longer term pipeline building, like how do I build a digital pipeline for the future? I know it's going to take a while. It's going to take a year or a couple of years. So that's what we're seeing from a lot of our clients, that a little bit longer recognition that, the roof is, I've got a leaky roof and the sun is shining today, but at some point it's going to rain again. So I better get that leaky roof fixed. And then those that are, hey, I just need some help now. What can we do to get some people in to be able to help us?
Now, I think the general feeling is during turbulent times, most firms, most companies are going to be looking to scale back, batten down the hatches. But in this day and age, should accounting firms be looking to grow even during turbulent times, or is it best to protect themselves from worst case scenarios?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really, when you think about it, it's a very important question for that. And I think the thing of it is the last several years give us a perspective here and give us some data, as you pointed out earlier, that these have been some of the best times for accounting firms. And the question is why? And the reality is your clients are going through the same thing you're going through. They have their uncertainties and they have all these regulations and laws and changes. And so they need somebody to help them navigate that uncertainty. And the accounting profession is in a great place to be part of that solution, to be the organizations that can help them navigate some of that uncertainty, prepare for what do I do if there's going to be a recession? How do I reallocate my cash flow? How do I deal with this new tax legislation that might be on the horizon and it might not? What do I do now to prepare for that? So I think the turbulence, while it's unsettling from a business and planning point of view, it's actually very good for the profession in terms of the demand and the need that clients have.
We did a video about the accounting profession, and it was targeted at high school students. This was probably 15 years ago. And one of the members that we featured in that video said, good times or bad, everyone still needs a CPA. And I think we've seen that demonstrated, whether it's the Great Recession or certainly the pandemic. I think we've seen that in practice because, like you said, if someone is going through their own turbulent times, who are they going to turn to? They're going to turn to someone or something that is stable and will help them get through those turbulent times.
Yeah, and help them, advise them and help them understand what this turbulence might mean for them. And I think that's where you're seeing so much of the opportunity is in the growth of advisory on top of the traditional compliance work.
Right. All right. Last question. This one's sort of near and dear to my heart. It's about the concept of sales or selling. I think these days everybody needs to be a bit of a salesman or saleswoman, as the case may be. Do you think sales or selling is more accepted in professional services firms today than 20 years ago?
Undoubtedly, it is than 20 years ago. I entered the profession just in the post-deregulation time when it was just starting, and there was a lot of skepticism then. But that's changing, and I think people recognize that it's important to get a good match with the clients. So it's selling, if it's done appropriately, is not manipulation. It's really education about how you can help them and finding a good match. And I think as people understand that, it makes it easier for them to accept it. And we find a lot of people refer to it as business development. That helps them, kind of not feel like they're being a pushy salesperson. So they have a negative stereotype in their mind, and they're still learning about what the right one. There was a reason that accountants didn't become salespeople. They took a different path. So there's going to be a little bit different level of acceptance on the front end of it. But we found that once people understand what the true function of sales is in a professional services firm, that there's much greater acceptance and embracing it.
Yeah, I agree. I think the first reaction most people, not just CPAs, have when they hear sales or selling is they think of sort of like the smarmy version of it, of the salesman who's just trying to sell you something you don't need. But we always say that when you're networking with someone from a business or a potential client, think about what you can do for them. It's not about selling them something they don't need. It's about how can you help them, and in return, hopefully they'll think of something that they can do that will help you. So it really is more about networking and relationships and partnerships than it is about sort of that old school movie version or Hollywood version of what selling looks like.
But wait, there's more. Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
All right. Well, Dr. Frederiksen, we really appreciate your time. This was great information for all of our members. We really appreciate you joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Don. Appreciate it.
Thank you all for listening and watching. For more information about Hinge and the work Dr. Frederiksen and his team do, visit hingemarketing.com. And for more resources on managing your firm, visit njcpa.org/hub/firm management.